Radhe Krishna, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Srimate Ramanujaya Namaha. Welcome to Thirukkolur Penpillai Rahasyam episode number 39. Our great scriptures, which includes the Itihas, Puranas, Upanishads, they are a treasure house of various eye-opening facts, stories, morals, lessons, which if followed would help one to lead a happy and a contented lifestyle. Unfortunately, for the want of time and in the midst of our busy life, we don't have the time or the inclination to look into these treasure troves. But we also tend to associate these scriptures as something which is out of times, or they are some materials which just preach principles of good living. That's it. We are not able to think beyond what these treasure troves could offer for our lives. Even if we were to start going in a bit or even touching the surface of these great scriptures, we would know that it's not only a document or a manuscript which preaches about good life, but it is filled with human emotions as well. Yes, these scriptures, these stories have all the essentials of good virtues like humility, love, care, devotion, but they also contain the negative emotions of anger, jealousy, pride, greed, and whatnot. A basic look or just touching the surface of Mahabharata, we see that Duryodhana was filled with hatred. He used deceitful tactics against his cousins, and that led to his downfall. In the same breath, if we also analyze King Yudhishthira, who was the epitome of righteousness, yet he had a weakness for the game of dice, which led him to lose everything which we possessed. He lost his kingdom, he lost his brothers, he lost his wife Draupadi, and as a consequence, they were all forced into exile. And this can also be considered as one of the reasons triggering the Mahabharata war. So if Duryodhana's hatred and other atrocious means led to the war and led to his destruction, Yudhishthira's weakness also contributed to the war, and finally Yudhishthira led a life after the war where he was filled with guilt and regrets about the ill effects of the war which had taken place. So these scriptures do inform us that these emotions, both positive and negative, are totally normal, are completely okay if a person goes through it. But looking beyond the mere facts or the mere story, one should try to get the message that if there is a case where we fall for some of our weaknesses or we develop certain negative emotions, they are surely going to result in either destruction or some kind of a guilt which we should avoid. So we should try to grab these messages and read the scriptures in this light. So today's Thirukkolur Penpillai Rahasyam also deals with a story where we can see all these human emotions at play, especially emotional quotient EQ is gaining a lot of ground. In fact, in most of the corporates, people are expected to have emotional maturity where they can understand the situation, understand the people, and then accordingly take a decision and accordingly interact. So let us see one example of a great sage who demonstrated this emotional maturity from our great epic Ramayana. So Thirukkolur Penpillai in her 39th Bhakti Rahasyam episode is benchmarking herself with this maturity shown by Sage Vasishtha. Her Bhakti Rahasyam to Swami Ramanuja is, did I ask Dasharatha to send Rama and Lakshmana like Sage Vasishtha? So let us see what this incident is about and what led Thirukkolur Penpillai to compare herself with this particular attribute. Now this Rahasyam about comparing with Sage Vasishtha is similar to one of our previous Bhakti Rahasyams on Sage Vishwamitra. It was Bhakti Rahasyam number 20. So the incident is the same, but Thirukkolur Penpillai very beautifully compares, or she tries to diagnose from the same incident what Sage Vishwamitra did. That was her comparison in Rahasyam number 20, and how Sage Vasishtha reacted. That is her comparison in the current Bhakti Rahasyam. So let us recap that incident and try to connect both Bhakti Rahasyams. It so happens that once in the kingdom of Dasharatha, Raja Dasharatha, Vishwamitra makes an appearance. So Dasharatha receives him very pleasingly. He praises him and politely asks him the reason for his visit. That is when Sage Vishwamitra says that he is engaged in a sacrifice or a yajna where he is facing constant threats by two demons. So he wants someone to protect his yajna. Raja Dasharatha says he is pleased to offer whatever help he can. Sage Vishwamitra says that he wants Dasharatha to send Rama and Lakshmana with him to protect the yajna by defeating the demons. Now for Raja Dasharatha, it is a bolt from the blue, because he had to wait for a long time to beget these 4 sons. At this point in time, Rama was around 11 years of age. He was just starting to learn archery. And Raja Dasharatha, because of the long years of having no child, he was very much attached to his sons, especially Rama being the eldest. Now he couldn't think of separating from his son because he knew that the mission was dangerous. It was no easy task to kill or defeat those powerful demons. So instead he offered himself and his huge army to Sage Vishwamitra, saying that Rama is just a child. He doesn't know the details of warfare. He's just learning. So he won't be able to come with you. So Raja Dasharatha apologizes and asks Sage Vishwamitra if he is happy with the alternative, that is Dasharatha and his forces coming with him. Now Sage Vishwamitra, till now he was hearing this patiently, he could feel the anger surfacing. In the presence of the court, he tells Raja Dasharatha that he knows, that is Sage Vishwamitra knows who Rama is, whereas Dasharatha, who is actually indulged in the worldly affairs, in managing his kingdom, in being with his wives, with his kith and kin, he has no idea of who Rama is. Just because he himself, that is Sage Vishwamitra, has done deep penances to realize the ultimate. That's why he makes that statement that he knows Rama. Now, Thirukkolur Penpillai had, in her previous Bhakti Rahasyam number 20, she had caught this point that Sage Vishwamitra so confidently, because of his powers of tapas or penance, he could declare in front of the whole court that he knew Rama. Aham vedmi. That's what the Bhakti Rahasyam goes like. Now, when this point was highlighted so confidently by Sage Vishwamitra, he cast a glance on Sage Vasishtha, who was the guru for Raja Dasharatha, and Sage Vasishtha also nodded in acceptance. And Sage Vishwamitra actually highlights this fact that even great sages like Sage Vasishtha acknowledge that Rama should be sent. Now, there is a little bit of history here between Sage Vishwamitra and Sage Vasishtha. They were always at loggerheads because of certain incidents which happened in the past. Now, that is another topic in itself, but in a summary, this Sage Vishwamitra was a king, and once he visits the hermitage of Sage Vasishtha, where he sees Surabhi, the wish-giving cow, and he wants to obtain that cow. Now, Sage Vasishtha refuses, and there is a fight there where this holy cow, Surabhi, produces an army which defeats the army of King Vishwamitra then. So this enrages the king, and he undergoes austerities, he undergoes penances to become a rishi. So there are various stages where he is in his penances, yet it is disturbed by the gods and he loses his power. So that's the story which goes along with Sage Vishwamitra's transition from a king to a Brahma Rishi. So finally, when he attains that post of a Brahma Rishi, that is, he has realized the ultimate, he looks upon Sage Vasishtha, where Sage Vasishtha agrees that he is now a Brahma Rishi. That means he has realized the ultimate. So these conflicts have happened between these two sages, or the king and the sage in the past, and that continued. So that's when, at this juncture, when Sage Vishwamitra is proposing something to Raja Dasharatha and asking Rama and Lakshmana to come with him, he looks at Sage Vasishtha, and at this point, Sage Vasishtha, by then even Sage Vishwamitra was a realized soul, so there were no conflicts now. So Sage Vasishtha also nods in agreement. So Sage Vishwamitra says, great sages like Vasishtha have also agreed for this. Yet Raja Dasharatha is not convinced. He is still in two minds. That is when Sage Vasishtha, he nicely manages the particular situation, because there are personalities with different emotions here. There is a king, that is Raja Dasharatha, who has all these feelings of attachments, love for his son, fear that he would lose his son. There is a sage who is fuming with anger, and there is the sage Vasishtha who then comes to counsel. He explains to Raja Dasharatha in a nice way that the king should send his sons without any fear with sage Vishwamitra. Now there are again a lot of stories tied behind the reason or the motto for which sage Vishwamitra approached the king for taking away his sons to protect the yajna. Now that is again a separate topic. So sage Vasishtha knew all these reasons why Vishwamitra had exactly approached Raja Dasharatha for Rama and Lakshmana. So he, from that position of having that information or knowledge, he nicely counsels Dasharatha, saying that with Vishwamitra, your sons, that is Rama and Lakshmana, will be totally protected. He, although is a Brahma Rishi, yet he is very powerful when it comes to warfare, because he was a king as well. So he still has that expertise in warfare as well as in the Shastras. So that way, the yaga or the yajna which he was conducting, he could have himself protected it. There was no need for him to come and ask for his sons, yet he came for some reason. So with this statement, Raja Dasharatha gets that confidence that his sons would be fit and fine, there won't be any issues, and then he agrees to send his sons, that is Rama and Lakshmana, with sage Vishwamitra. Now this can be regarded as the gateway to Ramayana, because if Rama and Lakshmana were not sent to the forest with sage Vishwamitra, there would not have been any killing of these demons. Then in this same story, as it continues, sage Vishwamitra ensures that Rama gets married to Sita and Lakshmana gets married to Urmila. So this episode may not have happened, and if Ram Sita Vivaha would not have happened, there wouldn't have been Ramayana with Hanuman and Vibhishan and other great personalities coming at the later stage. So this was the maturity which sage Vasishtha demonstrated, knowing that one person is totally angry, the other person is showing fear, yet he has to reconcile both the people and arrive at an amicable solution. Now, isn't this something which we can correlate with our work life or even in our family life, where we have two people to agree to a particular thing, yet their moods are different, their personalities are different. So this is the emotional maturity which sage Vasishtha demonstrated, which was immediately caught by Thirukkolur Penpillai as usual. Like, she has this knack of catching all these beautiful personality traits from the various great sages, learned people or the devotees of the past and presenting it in the form of this Bhakti Rahasyam. So she feels that I'm not as matured as sage Vasishtha from this episode. So what is the point in staying in this divine land of Thirukkolur? Now the message which we got was on the emotional maturity. So we can definitely learn from sage Vasishtha how to be cool. Obviously he was cool because of the years of penance and all his tapas. So there is no comparison absolutely of the state of mind he has and what we have, but at least within our boundaries of professional and family life, we can always strive to develop that kind of a trait or a behavior where we are able to step back from the situation, not to fall into the emotions of the people around, and try to come up with an amicable solution. One point which merits attention is whatever decisions or whatever are our thoughts, when we are in the rush of emotions, they tend to be wrong for most of the times. If we are angry and we want to say take a decision, that decision will be clouded with our anger. Similarly, if we are afraid of something and yet we have to take a decision, that will be clouded by the fear. So it is of utmost importance that we take any decision by stepping back from whatever emotional surges we may undergo. So that was our content and our lesson from the Bhakti Rahasyam episode number 39, with our Guru being Sage Vasishtha. So stay blessed, stay devoted, stay cool and stay tuned for our next Bhakti Rahasyam. Radhe Krishna, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Srimate Ramanujaya Namaha.